Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode. This is the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections and your host. A while back I did an interview with a gentleman, an author, speaker by the name of David Burkus. David is the author of a book called Friend of a Friend. And in that book, in the book, and certainly in the interview, I have a copy of the book, but in the interview he had mentioned that he talked about, the whole book is about influence, Friend of a Friend. And he talked in there that there was a study that was done, and actually this is in the conclusion of the book, it's page 212, but he references a study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, was published by a gentleman, Christakis and Fowler. They are professors, they're social scientists, and have written a number of other books. I know I've got one here, but they talk a lot about just how we interact with one another. At any rate, what they found in this study, and David remarked about on the podcast, was they talked about smoking. And essentially, here I'll read it to you. Quote, "If your friend smokes, the research found you are 61% more likely to be a smoker yourself." So if the person next to you, somebody you hang with all the time, is a smoker, you're 61% more likely to be a smoker. And the reverse is probably true as well. If you hang around somebody who's a non-smoker and you are a smoker, there's a likelihood that they could pull you over to being a non-smoker. I don't know what the percentages are, but this is what the percentages are here, but just stands to reason. But here's the interesting part. If a friend of your friend smokes, you are still 29% more likely to smoke. So you hang around with a non-smoker, but that non-smoker has a friend who smokes. You're likely, the likelihood that you pick up smoking, somebody you've never met, mind you, just a friend of a friend, you're 29% more likely to smoke. And for a friend of that friend, the likelihood is 11%. So if your friend is a non-smoker and he has circles of non-smokers, but one of those non-smokers is connected to a smoker, you'll have an 11% likelihood of becoming a smoker. And then it goes on to say researchers could also see how over time quitting smoking increases the chances of others in your network stopping. But they don't have any research on that. It's certainly just conjecture there. When David mentioned this to me and then I read it in the book, it's just I've continued to think on it and think about who I'm hanging out with and who they're hanging out with, and it all matters, right? I mean, it's important that your kids, you set an example for your kids and you spend time with them, and you're certainly an influence on their life, and the people they hang out with is important as well. But as I was thinking about that, I ran across an article that was in Success Magazine, the September-October 2021 issue of Success Magazine. And the title of the article is Jim Rohn on Relationships. Jim Rohn is kind of, he is very iconic in the professional development space. He has since passed away, but his influence, his insight, his legacy continues on in the likes of John Maxwell, Tony Robbins, Brendan Burchard, and you certainly can hear him in the likes of Lewis Howes and other newer people coming onto the scene. But what Rohn talks about, and essentially somebody is basically pulled this article out of his what they call the Jim Rohn archives. It talks about influence, and it talks about things that you can be doing to, I guess, really kind of assess what's going on around you. And there's a number of parts to this. The first is just kind of assessing what's going around you, and then if you're determining that it's not appropriate, what kind of action can you take? And then there's some final thoughts. So I'm going to kind of go through this. The first step that Rohn will have you take is to analyze your situation. Analyze your current associations. Who am I around? You have to make a mental note of the people with whom you most often associate. Certainly it can be easy if you're working in a workspace and you're showing up and there's a farm of cubicles there, and those are the people you're working with in and day out. And you don't necessarily have a lot of control over that, but it's easy to kind of figure out what's there. If you're self-employed and things are changing day to day, then you probably need to put a little more thought into it. You can kind of look at your emails. You can look at messages on LinkedIn and Facebook and see where there's the general association of people. But you have to be able to evaluate who are the people that you're having interaction with. And there's different layers of this, right? You have a family, you go home to your family. I have less influence on my kids now than when they were younger because, one, they're independent and free-thinking and smarter than their dad. But, we're not necessarily around one another all the time. But when they were around, my wife were primary influencers of the kids, and then secondarily were teachers and coaches, and they had certainly a lot of teachers and coaches through the years. And another big influence there were their friends, people that they hung around with, and those friends changed from when they were in grade school to middle school, on to high school, and then into college, and out in the working world. There's kind of been a shift here and there. Some of the friends have stuck, and some haven't, and maybe that's good, and maybe that's bad. But now that they're out in the working world, they have those sorts of associations as well. So the first step is figuring out who you're around. The second step is kind of analyzing what are those associations doing to you. I can think of associations I've had in the past where it's just not been good. And I'm not saying picking up smoking or adopting a sedentary life. I'm talking about people who were somewhat cantankerous in their approach to me, and I found myself being not just cantankerous back at them, but that carried over into other things, and I didn't like it. I didn't like that about me. So you have to ask yourself, what are those associations doing? And then the third step is that okay? Now, in that previous example, no, it's not okay. It's not, you need to be nice to people. That's not so hard. But sometimes associations are good. Sometimes we do associate with people, and you know what? They go for a walk at lunch. I need to do more of that. I need to park a little farther away. Oh, they've got an iWatch. I need to get an iWatch or a pedometer or whatever. And they're doing road races or whatever it is. Somebody I've gotten to know over the last few years, Dr. Rob Bell, who's a psychologist, mental toughness guru. I follow him on Facebook, and he's always doing these like ultra marathons, these ultra big runs, and I'm not interested in doing that. He's a little younger and probably built a little better for that, but I have to believe that just seeing the things that he does tends to influence me. Maybe I should do that. One of the things he does, which I think would be totally doable for me, he calls it a 4x4. 4x4 by 24, and he's done a 4x4 by 48. What the 4x4 by 24 is every 4 hours you go 4 miles, and you do that for 24 hours. Now, he's not saying you've got to run it so fast. I could walk it, and I'm sure he would be okay with it. But, 8 o'clock at night, midnight, 4 a.m., 8 a.m., noon, 4 o'clock, I think that finishes it. So you basically have 6 4-mile runs or walks or whatever. But the point is that just seeing the things he's doing kind of influences me to be a better person. So you do have to stop and ask yourself, are the things that people doing okay? Are they helping you? And some, people are, I know some people who are very tech savvy. My kids are very tech savvy. And I look at them and I'm like, you know what? I want to be more like that. I don't want to be helpless when it comes to technology. Now, I might not be able to keep up with them, but I want to try and do better. So you have to kind of ask, is that okay? But back to the example of becoming more cantankerous or whatever it might be, and it's not good for you, then you need to, and I'm getting back into Rohn's article here, you need to get into doing one of 3 things. One, disassociate. Yeah, you just have to say, okay, I just have to stop being involved with this person. It's certainly easy when you're in a self-employed, own your own business sort of world to say, you know what, we're not going to be doing business with that vendor anymore. I'm just going to fire that client, whatever it might be. You're no longer working here, however it might be. You have a lot more control over it. If you're working in that cubicle farm, if you're working in that environment, it's certainly a whole different story. It's hard to disassociate. But you can, this is the second part of this middle leg of Rohn's article, limit your association. You know what? I have to work with this person. I don't have to have lunch with them. I just don't have to have lunch with them. I can have minimal conversations with them. I can associate to the extent we need to associate from a work standpoint, from a professional standpoint. Even where you kind of control your environment, sometimes it's not easy to totally disassociate, but you can limit your association. And I find myself doing that with people on social media. Some people are just, it's not fun to engage in conversation with them. It's not fun reading their posts. It's not fun seeing their comments on other people's posts. I can still be their friend, and I find a lot of times they're different people in those settings, but I'm going to limit my association. Third thing Rohn talks about is expanding your associations, finding other great people to be around, finding more Rob Bells to be around, finding more Tom Andersons, finding more Lucas Agins, Logan Agins, Chase Agins to be around, people who have a positive influence on you. There's only so much time in a day, and just logic dictates that if you fill it up with really great people, you have less time for the people who are less than great. So those are the one, figure out who you're associating with, figure out what they're bringing to you, asking if it's okay, and if it's not okay, either disassociating, limiting the association, or expand your association with other great people. Now let me quickly touch on subjects, final thoughts in Rohn's article. He had 4 points that he brought out that I think are important. One, he says, when you succeed, you'll create and attract more success around you. Essentially, success breeds success, and as you move along, you're going to attract other good people around you. And when it comes to expanding your associations with great people, they're just going to come along as you succeed. So, some of this is the people around you. Some of this is under your control, is to relative to what you do. Work. Be the one who's out there being happy and healthy and not smoking or whatever it might be, being a nice person, and you'll move yourself along and you'll attract other good people to you as well. The next thing is initiate relationships with people who are further along in the personal and professional development area, further along on the spectrum. May have been doing it longer, may have read better books, may just have better emotional intelligence. Associating with those people, again, it's like hanging out with a Dr. Rob Bell, or hanging out with somebody who clearly has a high degree of integrity. Third thing, have people around you who you can rely on to basically speak the truth to you. You don't need yes people in your life. You don't people just saying, "Hey, you're great" all the time. "Hey, would you review this?" and knowing that you're just going to get glowing remarks. One of the best things, well, a lot of great things have happened to me, but a guy by the name of John Millen took my original manuscript, my first draft of the book Foundational Networking, and tore it to shreds. Not literally tore it to shreds, but he went with a red pen over that, and he spent an hour going through with me all the things I needed to change. That hurt. He told me I need to cut out 160 pages. He told me I need to rewrite everything. It took me 18 months to write the first draft. I was just beside myself. But I did it. And I needed to hear that, and it made the book a much, much better book. And so I appreciate that. And I need people like that in my life who are going to tell me the hard things in the right way. He was very kind about it. It still hurt, but he was kind about it and inspired me to do what I need to do. We don't need to make people feel bad. I don't want to feel bad. But we can certainly guide people, and you need to try and find, and I need to try and find people who are going to speak the truth. And then the last thing is carefully determine what will influence you. Certainly you need to know where you're going and how you want to get there, and know the types of things that you need along the way. But find the things that will influence you. Me as a self-employed person, as somebody who's kind of building on a mission to build a business, I'm looking for people who have kind of walked that journey and understand the ups and the downs, and getting kicked in the gut, having great days and realizing that you can't rely on that the next day may be another kick in the gut, and not get too overconfident, because those moments are fleeting, and just keep after it. Whether it's good, keep after it. Whether it's not, keep after it. And those are the types of people I'm trying to have in my life. At any rate, quick little discussion on influence. And I started out just by talking about David Burkus's book and just the whole notion back in the back of his book about the influence that people have in our lives. And it's not just the people we associate, but it's the people they associate with and the people that they associate with. All kind of has an influence on our lives. And then going on and talking about Jim Rohn's article, and you really need to be cognizant of this and do these assessments. Who's on my network and what are they speaking, and is it good for me? Is it bad for me? And if it's not good for me, what are the things I need to do? To wrap up, just to remind people, we are looking for people to get involved with AmSpirit Business Connections. If you know somebody who is an entrepreneur or a professional that would like to add on to what they're already doing, our franchise opportunity, that would be a great conversation for us. In fact, a lot of what we've been doing as of late is reaching out to people who just want to get started by starting a chapter in their area, and then going from there. So that's an option as well.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.